Never say never. And even if they don't use nukes, and folks, we're going to feel the pain. We're already talking, oil gone up over $100 a barrel. Gas prices are already spiking to record highs here in the States. Inflation is already all over the place. And this is going to make matters worse. Well, but then you got poor Joy Behar out there from The View complaining that this war might ruin her Italian vacation. Unbelievable. And admittedly, I gotta say, it's very difficult to find the truth. You really have to dig and do research. I apologize. I feel bad for you if you're one of those people that just sits there and watches one channel, cable news channel only, and doesn't look at anything else or listen to anything else. And that means Fox News 2 and Newsmax and 08. You got to look around. You got to dig. Some of the foreign press, too. If you're sitting there watching MSNBC all day or Fox all day, you're not going to get the whole picture. A lot of this stuff they don't even talk about. The news media today, in many cases, has been so dumbed down and creates more division, panic, fear, especially over the past 2 years with the pandemic. It's very, very easy to just, look at a headline. Oh, that must be true. You got to dig deeper than that, folks. And this brings me to it's not a story, but my wife was showing me a slide, a geographic and information literacy workshop for one of the classes she's taking. And it was a news media slide. To give you an idea, might have to post this on the website. But it's got from left to right, and it's got all these different news organizations. And to me, I found it very interesting who they have in the middle, minimal, balanced, or centrist. And then you've got, of course, the far right, which they call the alt-right, some of them, the alt-right. I'm going to read some of these to you. And it's fascinating because, I'll just say this, and I don't know why they have the Weather Channel on here, but the Weather Channel is in the very middle. If you want minimal bias, neutral, centrist news, go to the Weather Channel. I don't know why the Weather Channel's on there, but I suppose that has to do with climate change. But in the very middle, they've got, at the very top, AP and Reuters, the Houston Chronicle, the Denver Post, ABC, CBS, PBS, Bloomberg, The Economist. Those are in the most in the middle. Then just barely to the left, just barely, it's still pretty minimal, balanced, centrist. You've got NPR, Axios, NBC, the New York Times, just barely to the left, just barely. The Washington Post, Politico, Newsweek, CNN, the Huffington Post, The Guardian, TMZ, and then just a bit to the right, just a bit to the right, they've got Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, The Hill, Forbes, the New York Post. Oh, by the way, so you've got left to the right, right? And then at the very top of the chart, you've got the most reliable, and then at the very bottom, unreliable. And in the middle, mixed, somewhat reliable. And so the New York Post is in the unreliable portion of the just to the right of center. To give you an idea how the Daily Mail is completely, totally unreliable, barely to the right. And then let's go to the extreme left, unreliable, MSNBC. Slate Magazine, Democracy Now!, Salon. They've got these in unreliable. Then on the far right, and it's funny because this chart, almost everything on the far right is completely unreliable, according to whoever made this slide. So here's who they have. Totally unreliable. Of course, InfoWars, Breitbart, Fox News, Judicial Watch, OAN, The Blaze, Newsmax, Town Hall, The Washington Times, The Examiner, Real Clear Politics, Epoch Times. just pretty much everybody that I go to for the Daily Caller, PJ Media, American Thinker, WorldNet Daily, News Punch, Gateway Pundit, The Federalist. I mean, these are all completely unreliable, far-right news organizations. National Review. And then the far left, unreliable. They've had some of these, not surprisingly, I guess I've never heard of. Occupy Democrats, Alternate, the Bipartisan Report, Palmer Report, Daily Cause, Counterpunch. And then at the very bottom, with very little bias, but completely unreliable, the National Enquirer. I don't know. I found it fascinating to see how they group these. It's, shaped like a pyramid. But according to them, the most neutral, most reliable news site is AP Reuters. So take that for what it is. But and all that goes to say that's the point of it's very difficult to really get when you got a complex issue like this, when you got a war. Yeah, sure, it's easy to get the simplest dumbed down common denominator. Russia, Putin, evil. Ukraine has done nothing wrong, and we got to send troops there. We got to get involved. Send our men and women in uniform over there, and let's get involved in another war with Russia, and let's just get World War III started. Now, the reason I said World War IV earlier is because a lot of folks consider the Cold War was actually World War III. And now World War IV, you've got much more tech involved, obviously. Yes, you've got conventional weapons, and yes, you have the threat of nuclear holocaust, but you've also got this whole idea of hacking power grids, banking systems, trying to shut down economies. So completely different landscape out there now. Okay, moving on. There are other stories we got to cover here, and even though this is obviously at the top of the heap and could escalate much further, we have to cover other things. I mentioned this last time. This article that I didn't get to delve into deeply, I just read the headline. Top 10 ways American schools have been ruined by the leftists and the scamdemic. This is put out by Natural News, Monday, February 21st, 2022. Starts out by saying, there is no better way to stifle a child's learning than with all kinds of senseless distractions going on all around them at all times. Students' inability to focus on what matters is crippling the entire U.S. education field at all levels, and it's coming from all angles, so it's next to impossible to remedy. School board members and parents are stepping up to the podiums at meetings and all but screaming for change, but it's not one battle that's being lost, it's the whole war on education. Communism and pandemicism are crippling the American education system. From the top down and from bottom up, the curriculum, mandates, gender bender psychology, all being shoved down the throats of students at most public and some private schools all across the country. The liberal agenda isn't so liberal as nobody is allowed to think for themselves anymore about anything. The only rights they have or what they're assigned by the government. It's one warped size fits all now, and that's the old communist way. In other words, follow the narrative, teach the narrative, obey the narrative, and you won't get quarantined, fired, suspended, expelled, canceled, and reputation decimated on social media. COVID vaccines are causing limited blood flow. So many of the vaccinated are suffering from heart dysfunction, blood clots, myocarditis, and wait for it, COVID. Yeah, the folks getting the vaccine, they're getting COVID. The masks are limiting oxygen intake and maximizing carbon dioxide intake, thus restricting oxygen flow to the brain while limiting nutrient flow to the blood. Students are never allowed to work in groups or partners ever again until all things COVID are gone from the earth due to safety protocol. And how about that distance learning? Oh, that's been great, right? Virtual learning has been a nightmare. Kids are playing with toys during class, leaving the camera view so nobody knows what they're doing, being distracted by siblings, pets, snacks, music, you name it. Teachers are frustrated and losing the passion to teach. Fake or false positive PCR tests have everyone and their brother testing positive for COVID, even if they just have a head cold or the seasonal flu, which leads to a 10-day or even 14-day quarantine that are unfounded and don't help anybody at all, especially the student who goes strictly to the virtual unlearning environment. But wait, that's not all. There's more. Did you actually think you sent your child to school to learn? Forget about that. Most American students from age 2 to 21, think about that, from ages 2 to 21 are being libido trained to think about sex and their genitals and other sexual preferences all day. Science doesn't exist anymore in school. Only the study of whether you want to be a boy or a girl today, which bathroom to use, should you flow into another gender, and even what to call yourself according to the sex partners you would like. Plus, don't forget the core study, how to adore the sex-crazed drag queens who are reading stories to you. Yes, folks, yeah. Just do a search engine. Simple search. Drag queens are doing story time in schools. And this article's got creepy pictures, and I'm talking seriously creepy, because they're not just men dressed up as women. They got all kinds of weird makeup on, face paint, horns sticking out of their head. But you want this person reading a story to your child? And what they're doing is grooming children to become sex-crazed transgenders by taking dangerous hormone drugs and mutating their private parts. Oh, and then there's more. Most schools are teaching that all white people were born racist, overprivileged, undeserving jerks who should be on their knees praying for forgiveness to the black slaves from the 1800s. Most children and teens are stuck on smart devices from home all day due to quarantines and lockdowns. Everything they research is controlled and limited by fake news, fake science, fake history, and one-sided politics. Meanwhile, boys and men are hanging out in girls' and women's locker rooms, bathroom stalls and shower rooms, pretending like their gender is fluid. Some students identify as cats or dogs. Oh yes, there are stories. So there are literally litter boxes in the school bathrooms. I wish I was joking, folks. I really do. And teachers must bark or meow at them or face job termination. This is how the level of absurdity in the so-called education system nowadays. But then you got the elites and politicians telling you, telling the parents, you have no say in what we teach your children at school. So here's the big list, very quickly. Top 10 ways American schools have been ruined just in the past few years. This is an acceleration process. Number 1, lockdowns and virtual learning. Number 2, mandatory masks. Number 3, social distancing. Number 4, COVID vaccines, also known as gene mutation